All right. Hey, Bunker Labs. Hey, Launch Lab Online. Welcome to another virtual town hall that is part of our All In initiative. We are all in for you as entrepreneurs, and we are highlighting other entrepreneurs in our network, in our community, to elevate you and to see what you can do to navigate through crisis and the challenges that we are facing currently externally. I'm really excited that I am not leading this session today, that I get to pass the torch over to none other than Valerie Lavin, who is our Tampa city leader, one of our Tampa city leaders, I should say, who's an entrepreneurial guru. And Valerie, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself to kick us off and get us started to introduce our guest?
All right, well, thanks for letting me host today's town hall. As Liz said, I'm Valerie Lavin. I'm CEO of Luminary Global, founder of Action Zone, as well as one of the 3 city leaders for the Tampa chapter. Tampa, as you know, it's nice and warm and sunny right now, so I am outside hosting this town hall meeting, so I'm pretty excited about the great weather. Are you off, Liz, or am I continuing?
Yeah, go for it. Go ahead.
Okay.
No, you're good. No, I'm here.
Right. I didn't know if you were going to say anything else. So anyway, I am really excited today to host the town hall with Hugh Campbell. Hugh is a serial entrepreneur. He's a very dear friend of mine. He is the president of AC4S, which is a tech company here in Tampa. He's a former enlisted Army soldier, do some push-ups, and he later went on to West Point, and he's made a huge impact in the Tampa Bay area as far as entrepreneurship for the veteran community, doing a lot of mentoring, and I'll have him share a story about that in just a moment. But one of the things I really want to get across in our time together today is really just how to survive and then how to thrive during situations like a world pandemic. But Hugh, before we get started, I want you to tell everybody a little bit about yourself other than what I just viewed. And then I would appreciate it if you shared your story of one of your prior mentees that knocked on your door, so to speak, about your debut here in the Bunker Labs Launch Lab Online Facebook group.
Well, Valerie, thank you so much. I appreciate those very warm comments. And I just want to thank you and the Bunker Labs crew for having me today. So I know everybody's busy, so I'll keep my introduction short. But so yes, I enlisted in the Army and then went on to West Point and served 10 years active duty and then a bunch of reserve time afterwards. When I got out of the military, I went to work in corporate in the telecom industry, and shortly after doing that, I went to start my first company. We had venture capitalists out of New York City that were funding us. We sold that company actually after 9/11, which was again a very stressful period for our country. And then we started a couple of companies after that. The last one I sold in December of 2018. We did pretty well with that organization. It was a federal sector business. We did over $400 million in revenues. We had about 300 employees at the peak. And then we started this company, AC4S Technologies, a few years before that. And I took over running that company, this particular company, about 3 years ago. And so that's what we're doing now.
All right, awesome. And your mentee that you've been reconnected through, who is not a veteran, through Bunker Lab.
So yeah, so you know, one of the things I've been trying to do over the last number of years is try to give back. I do a fair amount of mentoring, and a few years ago I was working with the University of Tampa in their MBA program, and so I was mentoring those MBA candidates over the course of semesters. And so one gentleman who I was working with and I've kept a relationship with over the years. He graduated from that MBA program, joined the Peace Corps. His name is Craig Chavez. He went down to Peru to start a company down there. Came back a few years ago, and when he saw this announcement, he reached out to me and said, "Hey, I'm working with Bunker Labs out of Columbus, Ohio. So if as Craig is on, it'd be great to say hello and welcome you aboard as well."
That's awesome. And the reason why I wanted you to share that story, Hugh, is because, you know, we as an organization are always talking about the need to expand our network and leverage the Bunker Labs community. I mean, even my own company, Luminary Global, we have an opportunity to pivot and expand our offerings during this time of the coronavirus. And that wouldn't have happened if I hadn't met this company rep at Muster in Nashville last fall. His company is headquartered in Louisiana. So you just never know how your relationship with Bunker is going to help you with your businesses and your relationships. So a couple of housekeeping comments I wanted to share real quick before we get started is, one, I'm on a bicycle, so if you see me going like this every once in a while, it's because I'm riding away. And then I also have a basset hound. So before quarantine, it would have embarrassed me to have my basset hound barking, but now y'all gonna have to deal with it. So the first question here, everybody wants to know when they get on a Zoom meeting or call is, do you have pants on? Like, are you wearing khakis or you got your unicorn pajamas on?
I do. I am fully dressed today. Yes, I am.
All right. All right, awesome. So you shared briefly already your military and entrepreneurial career. And I know that you recently just sold another company. So what exactly are you up to now?
So, you know, whenever you transition, I've sold 3 companies over the years. So you often go through the process of what am I going to do next and all those things. You know, I grew up in a technical background, an engineering degree and all those kinds of things. So I knew I wanted, the last company we had kind of strayed from doing technology, and we had started doing all kinds of other things. And I knew I wanted to go back to my roots of doing pure technology, IT stuff. So this particular company, we're a tech support company. So we help companies in the Tampa Bay region, in Georgia, the Carolinas, Midwest, with their technology needs. And so we've been helping them largely in the last month and a half. We've been pushing and helping our customers get all their staff and cadre and employees going remote. So we have been very, very busy. You know, clearly technology is a big deal these days. Cybersecurity, we've been working on that. And we do a little bit of smart building implementations as well, because everything rides on the network these days.
How many employees do you have now?
So this is a relatively small organization compared to my previous companies. We only have about 10 folks. And the reason for that is because the software that we use allows us to do so much. We automate processes in that tech support process. We automate as much as we can. So we're able to do things that much faster, and it takes a lot less people. So we're really, really maximizing the software to help us support our customers.
So with everything going on, businesses slowing down, some speeding up, have you gained or lost any clients since the last couple of months?
Well, yeah, certainly. I think almost every business on the planet has had some reduction in revenues. We had a couple customers that came to us and were trying to conserve cash, and nonprofit, academic organization. We've had some in the tourism business. Their revenues have gone to zero. So they're looking to reduce. So I don't think anybody's immune from that, except for, a few companies that are in the personal protective equipment gear, equipment business, they're about the only folks that have seen revenues go up. So yes, we have absolutely been impacted by this.
Hmm. So until this particular global pandemic, have you ever been in another one in your lifetime?
Well, no, there's nothing quite like what we're experiencing now. I think if you are a student of the media and all that's going on, you'll see lots of folks using the term unprecedented. You know, oil went to negative pricing yesterday.
Right.
First
Mhm.
time in history, the $2 trillion that the federal government has done. I mean, it's absolutely unprecedented. However, I think, you know, 9/11 was, so you had the dot-com boom bubble burst. You had 9/11, and certainly 2007, 2008, 2009 were all very, very difficult periods. And this is unprecedented in its global nature and the fact that it's a medical issue. But there are some similarities in each of those trying periods that we just mentioned.
Yeah, I was going to ask you if there was anything, you know, close to what we're experiencing now that you've had to work through, and so what were some of the similarities that you were referencing?
Well, so certainly the decline in revenue. So the housing bubble in 2007 and 8 and 9, that had a tremendous chilling effect on many, many industries. And it was in fact international. There were other countries that were going through the same thing that we were going through here in the United States. Um, so there are some similarities there. The decline in revenue, the layoff of people, all those types of things. So it's just, this one is bigger and, you know, encompasses many, many more countries, right?
So you mentioned one of your companies at the peak, you had about 300 employees, and now
Yeah.
you have a team of 10, essentially.
Yes.
So how are your leadership tactics differed in challenging times that you're experiencing now compared to the challenging times that you went through when you had, you know, a couple of hundred employees? Because a lot of our audience, you know, they may be solopreneurs or 1 or 2 employees, maybe up to 10. And so share with us a little bit of how you're leading your team, or how you have led your team in the past.
Yeah, so I think that's a great question. And, you know, I do a lot of public speaking and talking about being an entrepreneur. And I often say that you have to change your management style every time that you add another zero at the end of your revenue stream.
Yes, I've heard you say that.
And, you know, that definitely changes, you know, you'll change your management style between 10 million and $100 million in revenue. You'll change that management style a couple of different times. What I will tell you, so the way you manage is different, but I will submit to you that the thing that's common is leadership. Your leadership style should never change. And I think the big deal in either if you're running a company of 10 or 20, 50 folks or 300 or 500, it's incumbent upon the leader of the organization to clearly communicate. That does not change. And I will tell you, when I was leading an organization of 300 employees and subordinate leaders and all of those things, you know, we still made it mandatory that once a year, everybody had to stop what they were doing. I don't care where you were in the world. I don't care what customer you were supporting. You had to stop what you were doing. You come off of vacation, come off of your day off, and you had to sit and listen and hear the senior leader talking about where we've been and where we're going. That, to me, was a critical piece. They need to hear, your staff, your employees, your customers, they all need to hear from the senior leader about where you've been and what you expect to see in the next 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, whatever it is. And it's very important to hear from that senior leader.
Well, I think I've heard you share that story before, and I always, if you haven't beat me to it, I always try to prompt you to share it, because I think really talks a lot to probably your military background, but just, you know, the type of leader you are in an organization, because there's definitely a difference in managing your company and leading your company. So I really appreciate that, you know, that you do that and share that story. So what, if any, advice you have for founders and CEOs to keep in mind when facing the unknown as we are now, when it comes to, you know, forecasting their business, making sure it's or survives and thrives?
Right. So another great question. So I I've been reading a lot and looking at lots of different things during this time. Um, and I will tell you, a lot of folks are are probably wondering how they can maintain their revenue in dealing with this down cycle. But you also should be thinking about what opportunities exist. You may have heard in the political scenes that, you know, you'll hear people say that never let a good crisis go to waste. Well, the same can be said of in business. So what are the new opportunities as we come out of this COVID-19 crisis? What are the things that you can do differently? Certainly, we're all working from home. Can't go anywhere. All right, so, you know, lots of folks have adjusted to that. The fact that we're on this Zoom call today is a perfect example. We're not all in one room. So, but you can extrapolate that to the rest of your business. What are the things that you can be doing? What are the things that you should be doing that you may not have considered post COVID-19? You know, I don't know what that is, but I think every leader of an organization should be having those conversations. Pull in your subordinate leaders, pull in your customers, pull in your partners, have those conversations. You know, what does this present to us as an opportunity? Is it a new revenue stream? Is it a new product? Is it a new service? You know, you should be having those conversations. You know, you may not know the answers, but by having those conversations with those people in your community, your employees, your customers, your partners, all of those things, I'm sure you'll find some tidbits that you can use.
So how would you advise companies when it comes to, you know, this fear of the unknown, potentially changing their prices or taking on products or services that may be on the peripheral of what they do, or not at all? They're just trying to take advantage of you know, the crisis. You know, when I've known some people, or you've heard on the news with price gouging, how do you contain your excitement, if you will, and stay competitive when other companies are increasing their prices? You know, there's a sharp spike in prices of PPE, for example,
Right.
you know, really without losing their ass.
Right. So, well, first off, there's a bunch of questions there, but let me tell you, I always tell entrepreneurs that you'll probably be most successful in doing the things that you know. I'm a technology guy. I would struggle to open a restaurant. I just don't know much about restaurants. So Hugh Campbell's personal words of wisdom was, you know, be careful and make sure that you're doing things that you know. Now, having said that, again, if you can logically step through a process that takes you through a new product or service that may be directly related to what you're doing or may be tangential. But if you can go through that process, kind of like a business plan, when you know the threats, you know the opportunities, you know the competitors, all of those things that you would normally go through in devising a business plan. And if you've been in business, you understand, you know, the risks, and you understand, you know, the possibilities, financing, all of those things, then, you know, go for it, right? Don't be afraid. You know, failure is a fantastic teaching tool, right?
Yeah, well, entrepreneurship, we take risks. You know, we're all entrepreneurs, we take risks, but we want to make sure that they're calculated risks, basically what
Right.
I heard you say.
That's exactly right.
And so failure is a good thing. Would you care to share a failure that you learned something from that could be a takeaway for our audience?
Oh yeah, I've got plenty. Where do you want to
What's your
start?
favorite
Gee.
one?
I tell people that I've had the full experience. Just a perfect example. You know, the first company we started way back when, where we had venture capitalists out in New York City. You know, 9/11 came. Um, uh, you know, they were going to pull back the funding on the rollout, on the city rollout, and the cities that we had lined up to roll out. We had Indianapolis, Minneapolis, Baltimore, Atlanta, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And they said, well, hang on tight. We're pulling our funding for this initiative, this venture. You know, it was shocking. But, you know, I couldn't take that personally. They were money people. We knew that they were driven by return on investment. They looked at the lay of the land post 9/11, and everybody kind of forgets 9/11. We had 9/11. We were about to go to war in Afghanistan. President Bush said, "Get ready." We had an airplane fall out of the sky in New York City that was headed down to Dominican Republic. We had anthrax down in South Florida, and we had the sniper case running around DC. So the national psyche was bad. And so they looked at that and said, we're not going to spend any more money, and we're gonna fold up and take our tent home. And, you know, we could have looked at that and said, that's a failure. But what we did was we learned, we looked at it as, hey, look at all the stuff we've learned. We have learned from scratch how to turn up a company, do the business plan, convince the investors to fund the thing, raise the capital, you know, all of those things. It was just a tremendous learning experience. And oh, by the way, I knew at that point that I couldn't go back and work in corporate. So
Yeah.
that led to starting the second company and the third company. And, you know, it's been a great run. I've learned a lot. We've employed a lot of people. We've had some level of success. But that first failure, you know, turned into a wonderful thing. I'm, you know, quite honestly tickled pink that I had the opportunity to learn all of that stuff with other people's money, and then be able to turn that into, you know, a fairly successful business that is businesses that have employed hundreds and hundreds, over 1,000 people.
That's awesome. Yeah, I can never imagine myself working in corporate. Even the challenges that we've had with Luminary Global, I know I've shared with you some over the last couple of years. There's no way I could do it. So we have a couple of questions. Oh, go ahead, finish.
And I was going to tell you that, you know, again, going back to those, nothing is ever straight up and to the right. You know, it's zigzag. It goes like this. There will be good days, there'll be bad days, but those things are part of the experience. And that's the thing that makes you wiser. So don't get down on it. Yes, there'll be bad days, and sometimes you'll be up 2 o'clock in the morning, wondering how in the world am I ever going to get through this? But guess what? You will. You know, if it fails, okay, it fails. So go out and do something else. You have learned a lot. Go for it. I'm sorry. I apologize.
No, it's okay. We appreciate it. I had one of those nights last night. I was up thinking about it until 1 a.m. and back up thinking about it at 4:30 a.m. So, and
Right.
I'm sure there's a lot of listeners right now that have had those experiences. So, to the question,
Okay.
what made it easier to transition from leadership to delegation?
That is a great question. Again, as a small business and as you're growing, you're gonna have to decide when you're gonna let loose the reins, because you know, growing a company is a team sport. You can't do everything yourself, and you're gonna have to, you know, I will tell you one of the, you know, the light bulb moments for me was I'm walking by one of our conference rooms, and my subordinate leaders are having a meeting without us. We're like, I can't believe they're having a meeting without us. But you have to let go, and you can't be everywhere. Your job as the leader of the organization is you have to clearly set the objectives, the goals, and the tone. You know, if you've ever been in one of my organizations, you know that, you know, we treat customers with respect. We never do anything illegal or immoral or otherwise stupid. Um, you know, we just don't do those things. We don't cut corners. We don't, you know, we just don't do things. And it's incumbent upon you as a leader to set the tone. Your subordinate leaders, the people that you work with. You know, we had a customer a few years ago accuse us of doing some bad stuff and publicly stated so, right? And I can't tell you how many folks came in and said, you know, that just doesn't sound like Hugh Campbell and his team. That this doesn't jive.
Didn't add up.
Right, it doesn't add up. It didn't. So, you know, if you're known to be a scallywag, then you know, people will, when those stories come up, they'll say, yeah, that was probably those knuckleheads. But as a leader of the organization, you have to set the tone, you have to set the direction, and you at a certain point you have to turn your subordinate managers, supervisors, and leaders, you got to set them loose.
Well, I've met some of the folks that you've hired and fired, and the ones that got fired, I wasn't surprised. So, all right, I got another question for you.
Sure.
Can you speak on long-term fiscal planning in the early stages of business? If you're an entrepreneur who has a startup under 2 to 3 years old and this crisis happened, how can you plan for financial success in the long term?
All right, well, so in the long term requires some, so long term is a strategic discussion. And there are some very tactical things that you need to do in the short term, you know, survival mode, right? So first off, cash is king. You should be conserving cash as much as possible. That's going to be the thing that's going to get you through. If you need to go out and get any type of financing, I don't care what kind of financing it is. It may be from angel investors, it could be from your mom, your dad, whatever, a bank. You know, having cash available, you know, you'll often hear them talk about strong balance sheets. In the short term, a strong balance sheet will get you through the survival mode so that you can be strategic in what you're going to do in years 3, 4, 5, and 6. You know, so there's, as I said, you got to focus on very tactical things in order to survive as you're contemplating and laying out your strategic options.
That's interesting. So that kind of leads, let me see, is there another question? Oh, well, that takes me back to another question that we had earlier about, expanding or adding new service or products during times of this. So if cash is king, what additional advice would you have in taking those types of calculated risks?
Right. So I think the key is the calculated risk. So we know that it's not going to be like this forever.
Mm.
It's just not. It can't be. I mean, there's already discussion about some states opening back up. So you know it's not going to be like this forever.
Mhm.
So again, what can you do? What should you be doing in that calculated process of saying, hey, I'm going to do this product, I'm going to offer this product, I'm going to offer that service. You know, what are your competitors doing? You know, I often say that, you know, when the tide rolls in, all boats rise. And so in 2008, the last thing in the world you wanted to do was start a mortgage company, right? Or a residential construction firm. But in the year 2012, 13, 14, hey, cybersecurity is hot. Hey, in the year 2020, online video conferencing is hot, right? So, you know, can you probably make some money in any of those areas where the tide is rushing in? Probably. So, you know, there's a wide, we could talk on that for hours, but I would tell you, you know, be measured, go through your process, do your homework, talk to people, and take those calculated risks on those new products and services that will be a huge benefit to your organization, you know, 6 months from now, a year from now, 18 months from now.
All right, we got another question. Can you speak to solutions that entrepreneurs can put into action now for their businesses? Cybersecurity, data management, etc., so that those things are in place on the recovery side of things.
So I think that I'm gonna take a more fundamental approach to that question. So technology pervades everything that we do. This video conference call right now on Facebook Live, streaming on Facebook Live and Zoom, is a perfect example. So yes, technology pervades all the things that we do, but I will tell you that I think the real answer to that question is you should have in place the fundamental infrastructure to scale. So you will need a perfect example. My CFO told me years ago, get a line of credit while you don't need it. It's very, very difficult to get a line of credit when you actually need it. So you should have established that banking relationship. They should know you. You should know them. Put in place that line of credit, the treasury management, all of those things. You can talk about technology. You can talk about cloud-based emails, storage and backups, all of those things. Whatever the infrastructure is, put those things in place before you need it. Because it's very, very hard to redesign the plane while it's in flight.
Yeah, that's one of the things our dear mutual friend Betsy Irizarry told me when I started my first company. She would always say, infrastructure, infrastructure, infrastructure. If you don't have that taken care of, and everything else will fall apart.
Yeah, and another example is, you know, argue if you have business partners, argue about the money before there is money, because then it's an academic discussion and you can come to an agreement, as opposed to, hey, we just made we have our first purchase order for $100,000.
Yeah.
You know, it's no longer an academic discussion at that point, right? So I don't care what it is. If it's a line of credit, go through that process, fuss and fight with the banks, credit cards, you know, tech support. You know, how are you going to do your tech support, right? You know, go through that process before you even ever need that stuff, right?
Right. So we have a few more questions. What are some of the opportunities entrepreneurs can put in place that will continue to be part of their businesses after recovery? Things that might not have been prioritized before, but will become fundamental in their success. And we have 2 more questions after that.
So what are the priorities? I think I missed the first part of the question.
What are some of the opportunities entrepreneurs can put in place that will continue to be part of their businesses after the recovery? Things that might not have been prioritized before, but will become fundamental in their success.
Well, I think, you know, I think every line of business is different. Every industry is different. So very difficult to answer that question outside of the context of a particular industry or line of business. However, I will tell you that the opportunity is fear, right? You may have heard the old saying that fear sells. So just because the government comes out and says that you can go to the gym or a restaurant or whatever the thing, you know, for me, it's salsa, right? Dancing to salsa, right? So just because the government says that you can do that, are people really going to be comfortable doing it? So whatever the opportunity is, how are you going to make your customers comfortable? Isn't that really the opportunity?
Yeah.
How are you going to make them comfortable returning to whatever the thing is? So I think, you know, again, without a particular line of business or industry, I think broadly across just about every organization, as we come out of this, hell, for your employees, how are you going to make your employees comfortable coming back to work?
I've got a solution for that, but
right.
I'm not going to make this a commercial for Luminary Global. What is the difference between pivoting completely in a business to meet a current need and temporarily offering something to continue to have revenue? How do you go back to your original business plan after this is over?
Well, yeah, that's great. So again, you know, what we talked about before, it's pretty rarely up and to the right. It's going to probably go like this, right? Mm-hmm. So in your first few years, you know, let's face it, you're going to go where the revenue takes you, right? So you know, if you're going to pivot to do something in the short term, okay, that's fine. Should you stay there, or should you go back to what you were doing before? You know, we had a couple of companies ago, we had an advisor, a board member that would insist that once a year, he would insist that we stop what we were doing, go do an offsite. We were tiny, I mean, really tiny. And he would insist that once a year we go offsite and stop and think about what business are we in, what business should we be in, and then right after that, from a personal perspective, what are your personal hopes, dreams, and desires? Because those change over time. And does the business and what you're doing match your personal objectives. So I would venture to say that, you know, while we've got some downtime here, just about everybody should be evaluating what business you're in, what business you should be in. What are your personal objectives? Hey, for me, I actually know people that have died. And so what does that do for your mental psyche, and how do you want to spend your time? Quite honestly, I'm at a point where if it ain't fun and if it's frustrating, I ain't gonna do it. So, so you have to evaluate where you are in life, what's important to you, and does the business and how you're operating, what you're doing all day, every day, does it fit your personal objectives? I think you should do that once a year. We did that and it served us well.
I appreciate you saying that, and it's so relevant. In January with my company, it's just me and Jeremy, as you know, because I am fighting hiring after retiring as the first sergeant. I was like, I never want to supervise anybody again to save my life. But
Yep.
I insisted that we did do a company offsite, the two of us. We actually left the house. We went and stayed in Bradenton, which is like only 45 minutes away, but I'd never been there, so I thought this was great. And I implemented everything that I've been teaching through Action Zone over the last couple of years. A part of our course, Mission Mapping, which is taught by Air Force retired Russ Barnes, as well as EOS, the traction book for most of our bunker audience is familiar with that. And I truly believe the fact that we did that just before this pandemic became crazy for us has helped us survive right now, because we were just going, and we're having a hard time keeping our arms wrapped around everything. So I think, to your point, you said it, you were told to do that when you're a much smaller company. And I'm sure it serves as well, or if not more importantly, and you're bigger. But for a two-person team like Luminary Global, it really has saved our company through this, I think. So one last question. How have advisors and mentors shaped your entrepreneurial journey?
Oh, huge. I often say, I stand on the shoulders of those that have come before me. I could not have done this myself. My mentors, people that have looked out for me, I usually try to take bits and pieces from all of them. A perfect example is a friend of mine, a guy I really respected from a leadership perspective. I was kind of struggling with our last company, and we had been growing, and he was running. He was still in the military at the time, and he was running an organization that had subordinate units around the globe, and he's the one that told me once a year, have everybody stop what they're doing and listen to what you have to say. So I took that from him. The board member that talked about going off site and being strategic once a year, took that from him. So, and as well, as you guys know, you guys have been around, you've seen bad leadership, right? So you know what not to do. So I think you can learn from just about all of those situations and scenarios and all of those people. But I will readily admit I'm not the smartest guy around. I can see trends. I do have a little bit of vision, and I'm willing to go out there and try to take that vision and put it into action. I know from our military training what it takes to attack a problem and execute. I can do that. Am I the smartest guy around? No, absolutely not. But all those things that you've been taught, from just about everybody that you've touched, yeah, that's the sum total of your experiences, and that's what's gonna get you through. And if you don't have those mentors and leaders that you can reach out to, you should work on that. Everybody needs help, and in the good times and in the bad times, you're gonna need help. So I would suggest that you find someone that you can ask those questions.
All right. Well, Hugh, thank you so much. Really, I can't tell you, every time I've asked you for your time, you've always given it generously, you know, to help the community and help other fellow entrepreneurs, whether they're veterans or not. Your advice and your wisdoms always helps me, even if I've heard them, some of your stories multiple times, I always take away some nugget. But yeah, thank you. And I hope it's not raining in Tampa, because it's not raining in St. Pete.
Well, again, I just want to say thank you to the whole Bunker Labs team, all the folks that are out there. Hopefully we've given you a little bit to think about, and it will help you through these very trying times. I will tell you, this too shall pass. We will have a new normal. That's okay. The only constant is change, and we'll get through it. So thanks a bunch.
Thank you.
Well, I want to thank both of you, Valerie, for leading the conversation. I think it's especially poignant just because you know Hugh so well. That really helps with the conversation, knowing more information, of course, than I do. And Hugh, thank you so much for being generous with your time and giving our community that. I have a slight suspicion that some people in this group know you pretty well, because we had a couple Salsa King comments as well. So Bunker Labs Launch Lab Online, you know, Valerie is one of our city leaders. I just want to encourage you that if you do need something, need support, find those mentors, peer mentorship in this group as well. Reach out. We're all in for you. I'll drop a few links below to resources. And I don't want you to forget that tomorrow at 3 p.m. Eastern Time, we have a town hall with Brian Hamilton that we are encouraging you to bring your kids, because he's going to be talking about youth entrepreneurship and how maybe you can take some pressure off and utilize this time for your kids to explore entrepreneurship and their interests as well. Thanks again. And as always, the door is open.